Hello and welcome everyone back to Push the Point. My name's Simon and today I'm joined by Leila Green, one of the best ninja players in the UK right now. She's top 10 XP for 90 days, looking easily to be qualified for nationals, and today we are going to talk about an in-depth review of Katsu in celebration of Lila's win at the Geek Retreat Leeds RTN the weekend just gone. Leila, how are you? How are you doing today?
Good, nice morning. Hopefully the sun will come out later on. It's been a bit rainy in Leeds this morning.
I was going to say we wouldn't be British if we weren't talking about the weather at some point, so we've got that bit out of the way. Our American friends won't really understand. They don't really do weather talk. Um,
No.
just tell me before we get stuck into Katsu and the journey we're going to go on today. How was your weekend last weekend? How was Geek Retreat Leeds?
Yeah, so heading into RTN season, I was comfortable with my XP. I think probably for the past 6, if not 12 months, I've been top 20 at least. So I was pretty happy. I
Yeah,
attend my armories regularly because I just love the game. Um, but I had taken Katsu to Baltimore and hadn't had great success with it.
yeah,
But after I tell you my first 4 rounds of Swiss in CC, you'll probably understand why. So I was expecting the Oldims, expecting the
yeah,
Lexes. I'd practiced into the Azalea matchup a ton.
yeah.
And round one, Dorinthia.
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
okay. We know what to do here. Yep, got this in the bag. So we took round one
Yeah,
win. And we get paired into Phi. I'm like, okay, I've played Phi.
yeah,
I know Phi.
yeah.
I know what to do here. Phi did fine.
Fi went off.
I did
Ridiculous
went
turn.
off. Nothing you could
Yeah,
do. So unfortunately, that one was a loss. Then Briar. I think Briar's a tough
oh,
matchup for Katsu.
it is.
Um, and then finished off the Swiss with a Rhinar. I was like, where was the meta here?
Yeah,
Like,
you've
what
literally played
happened?
4 non-meta decks in your first 4 rounds.
Exactly. So felt maybe a little bit defeated, but
Okay.
also I hadn't exercised my game plan yet.
Yeah.
Um, so I was heading into Geek Retreat Leeds knowing I know there's going to be Oldims here. I know there's going to be so many Lexis
Yeah.
here. Um, and yeah, it went well. My only loss of the day was to my friend Matt on Katsu.
Okay. So the Katsu mirror.
So it was Katsu Mirror. He won the dice
He went
roll.
second.
He tweaked his list since Baltimore,
Okay.
and yeah, it was a race to the finish line for us.
Yeah. I mean, and then you second going into top eight or top seed?
I think I was fourth going into
Oh,
top
okay.
eight. Yeah. So I was in the top seeding of my
Yeah.
pairing, which helped
It
out.
does help.
Yeah. Faced an Azuri first,
Oh.
which I had been playing in Blitz for quite a while.
Yeah.
And I tested for Baltimore, but I couldn't quite
Couldn't quite
get
get it
her
to
there.
work. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, unfortunately for my opponent on that one, I think I did end the game on 32 life because Katsu just did
Yeah.
Katsu
Just
and
went off.
it was brutal.
And then I think in the semi-finals you played against a well-known UK player, Liam Holden, on Oldham,
Yeah,
one of his favourite heroes.
yeah. So
And I hear you did some sneaky banishing.
I'd faced Liam in the Swiss,
Hmm.
and I knew he wasn't on a full defensive
Sorry.
list.
Yeah.
So he was a bit more aggressive than I was expecting.
Hmm.
So the fatigue Golden plan kind of sort of went to the side, but I
Okay.
still had that one sneaky
Yeah.
cyclone
Well,
roundhouse just in case.
it does. I mean, I heard people talking after the event about this secret spice that Lila had in her list, and and when it I was like, well, what is it like? And they were like, oh, Cyclone Roundhouse. I was like, that's not a secret. That was like the card that I pinned my Oldham matchup hopes on when Outsiders came out. It's a completely ridiculous card. Um,
Yeah,
although I think we talked briefly after the event, and you said some of the Oldham players are starting to play around it by
yeah,
using their um, Ironhide boots and not
Yeah.
paying for them to give an extra card on the chain link, which
Yeah.
it's a great way. It's a really sneaky way. You're not paying for it. It's not defending for anything, but it's a card on the chain. So
Yeah.
again, an interesting workaround for that particular mechanic. But again, it depends on them knowing that that's coming.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Liam knew it was coming,
Mm.
and when he blocked with the rampart, he did block with a card from hand as well. So it
Ah,
was a
okay.
50-50 dice roll,
And
and
it went
half of the room were watching, and the dice went in my favour for once.
very good. I mean, that's what it's there for. It's a great card in that matchup. And
Yeah,
then what your final was an aggro final?
it was Dramai.
Oh,
So the Dramai that had just knocked Matt, who was also on
oh,
Katsu,
okay.
out of the final spot with his Tomultai turn one.
Oh, that's harsh. That is
Yeah.
harsh. Um,
Um,
I know Katsu Dromai is one of those matchups where all of the Katsu players are like, yeah, got this in the bag, and then all the Dromai players think they've also got it in the like. They know it's a difficult matchup, but they think they can win it every time, and it makes me
yeah,
laugh because personally I'm not worried about going into Dromai with Katsu, and I think Katsu has so many tools and so many attacks of varying power that you can usually pick the right one to kill the dragon on the board at the and then make it fit with a mask trigger or whatever you need at the time. It's quite free card draw is always good. So
yeah.
it does
I
worry me a
think,
little bit when they go fatigue strategies, but there are ways around it, like we've said.
yeah, I think the fatigue Dramai players are maybe dropping off a little bit. I
Mm,
haven't seen much of that um, when I've watched coverage of other RTNs. Um,
it does
but
seem to
yeah,
be
the
more of the
plan for
aggro
fatigue,
lists. Yeah,
yeah, fatigue Dramai, let's treat it the same as fatigue Oldhim and execute plan.
execute the plan. Now we will come back to the plan because I think Katsu is one of those heroes that does need a plan.
Hmm.
But let's take it back. So you and I both played Ninja a fair amount. I mean, a fair amount.
Hmm.
You've been on Fi. You're now on Katsu. You were on Katsu before Fi. Like you've been back and forth
Yeah.
between the two. And I remember you winning the Fanboy 3 winner box, and you got the cold foil Katsu from the original sort of um, skirmish seasons that
Yeah.
they happened to have there. And you were super happy. It was so amazing to see you delight in that little piece of cardboard. Um,
Right.
and what brought you firstly to the game of Flesh and Blood, and then what brought you to Katsu specifically?
Yeah, so I started out the game when Aria came out.
Okay, yeah,
So I think one of my first games was myself and Rob bought a box of Aria, went on holiday to Cornwall, and did some sealed.
oh wow, that's pretty cool.
That was really back in the early days before we were even heading to armories at that
Hmm.
point. So I initially picked up Oldhim because
Okay,
I saw Red Glacial Footsteps and thought,
okay,
this card should win every game, right? Um, it quickly became clear to me that Oldhim didn't fit my play
okay.
style because I didn't want to block and I wanted to attack, attack, attack. So I think that's when I first picked up Katsu
Hmm.
because at the time Katsu was sort of coming out of being a more defensive deck.
Yeah. So
Um,
So I'm going to stop you there because I just realised you said Rob. I should be clear to listeners. Rob is Rob Catton, who is obviously another very good player in the UK. This is like the power couple of Flesh and Blood in the UK. They're always at events. Um, so you both got into the game at the same time in Tales of Aria.
mhm.
Did you have a background? I know Rob played Magic before. Did you play any other card games before this?
No, so when we first met, Rob was big into Magic,
Mm,
but kind of felt like I was too late to the game at that
okay.
stage because people that will know me know that I'm very competitive and that when I don't win at something or I'm not very good at something,
Okay.
it's just not great.
One of those
Um,
stories. Yeah.
yeah, so we picked up a lot of deck building board games during the lockdown. Um, so I think we have all but one or two of the Ascension
Okay.
expansion
Yeah. Yeah.
packs. And I just kind of was like, I didn't know these kind of games existed.
Yeah.
So yeah, no background um, with magic or anything like that, but picked up Flesh and Blood and was like, yeah, this takes being competitive to a whole another level rather than just the two of you in the living room.
So interestingly, you mentioned competitiveness there. My wife and I are also extremely competitive, especially when it's against each other.
Yeah.
And when I got into Flesh and Blood, we used to play on the kitchen table together. And within about a month, I'd been going away. I'd been looking at all the US content on how to play Flesh and Blood, how to get better, and it became a bit of a snowball. So I was just winning every game. And she was like, "I'm out. You've done too much. You've gone too far. I'm out." And I think it made me just think about your reference to Magic there. If one person takes a considerable step beyond the other, it can get tricky to
Yeah,
balance. Um, so you quickly realised after playing a bit of Oldham that that aggro was your
yeah,
wheelhouse. That was your go-to. And as you rightly said, Katsu had a bit of a turtle Katsu face. So he multiple defense reactions, flick flacks everywhere,
yeah.
sink belows, and he would just turtle up and sit there and then ping everyone with Kodachis every turn to try and get the opposition hero to the danger zone. Um, I think the time you got into the game, Tales of Aria, you're right. It was sort of Katsu was starting to rival Chain for the aggro title. And I
I
say
was
that
trying.
he was trying. I say that because I remember winning an RTN in the first season, and I beat a Chain in the semi final, which was I was super
Oh,
happy
nice.
about. Um, but yeah, what took you down that aggro Katsu path?
Yeah, I think, as you say, Chain was very big at the
Mm,
time. As somebody that was very new to playing this type of game, I think arcane damage kind of scared me away a
okay,
little
yeah,
bit
yeah,
from Chain. Um, I did pick up the Prism starter deck.
yeah,
Um, but again, whilst you could be aggro with it, it wasn't
yeah.
aggro enough. And I think just picking up that Katsu, having the really nice, solid
Mm,
Kodachi, pick whichever combo line you want to do.
mm.
I think at the time it was maybe Rushing River, Flood of
Was
Force,
it
Torrent's Tempo lines I was
okay?
playing.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and just the threat of Mask of Momentum was always terrible for people. And I think I've said it over and over again. I think it is my favourite card in the entire game, Mask of
it
Momentum.
does so much, and
Right?
it doesn't just um, it doesn't just do things. It changes the way your opponent plays the game, and I think that's
Exactly.
incredible. Yeah,
Yeah, I think the text on it sometimes is a bit irrelevant
yeah,
because they're going to block out that third attack
yeah.
anyway.
Whatever it is, exactly.
Yep.
And I think what people who either haven't played Katsu or aren't used to playing against Katsu don't realize sometimes is that actually a lot of the skill in playing Katsu is around structuring your turn to threaten that mask rather
Yeah.
than just playing out. We've both played Fi. You can often just
Hmm.
play out the cards in your hand. It's not
Hmm.
necessarily relevant every turn what order you do that. You're going to try and trigger mask because you've got three go agains in your hand. But with Katsu, it's often a lot different because you're trying to use different combo lines.
Yeah, exactly. And um, you also might be trying to stack that with Katsu's ability
Yeah,
itself. Do you need to go and find that zero? Are you going to cross your fingers and hope for the best?
yeah, and again, it just his hero ability, unlike Fi, which yes, you can pull a card back from the graveyard, but Katsu's hero ability makes every attack action card an on hit threat,
Hmm.
and it makes your opponent think about their block. Maybe it doesn't make them block, but it makes them think about that and what could be coming next, which I love as the aggressor.
Hmm.
I want to make the opponent block with more cards, um, and it sounds like you're on a similar just go go go.
Yeah.
Amazing, like
Yeah, and it's interesting about the hero ability right now. I think we'll get into specific game plans and the deck
mm,
that I played at the weekend later. But we're not just thinking about the cards in hand and cards in deck with Katsu anymore.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
what's in your graveyard as
Yeah.
well. That's super important right now.
And it's again really interesting when you pick up your graveyard at the beginning of the turn and your opponent looks at you as just to say, what are you doing? Like, what cards have you got? Is it bonds? Is it something else I need to be aware of? And yeah, it's really, you can really tweak some people by the
Yeah.
odd check of the graveyard, which is awesome. So you are an aggro Katsu player, then you like to go
Yeah.
fast. Do you think that has a place in the meta right now, or do you think your win on Sunday last week or last weekend, sorry, was a product of the meta that you play in? Like, what do you think Katsu's situation is right now?
I think Katsu's very well suited for this meta, and I think um, he's sort of the underdog that if
Mm,
you know what you're doing with him, you can do very well with
mm,
him. So I think I alluded to it before that you need a game plan
yeah.
into most of your matchups. I think like you say, you can pick it up.
Mm,
An average player, a new player, can do very well with Fi. I don't think that's the same with Katsu. I think you have to know
yeah.
what you're doing, and you have to be able to plan maybe one or two chain links ahead as well.
Yeah.
So I think into sort of your Lexis right now,
Mm,
the on hits for Katsu are just more detrimental than the on hits that Lexi can give out.
mm,
That being said, I don't think Katsu is favoured into Ice Lexi,
no.
which I haven't seen much of. But if people think that Katsu is doing well, then we might see more Ice Lexis, and it's
Yeah.
just a miserable time all around for a Katsu.
When you're trying to battle against 4 or 5 frostbites in a turn, and they flip the Arctic incarceration, sorry, and they've played it at the end of their turn, you're like, well, what am I going to do
Yeah,
against that? I've got 4 red cards.
yeah, exactly. I think the deck I'm playing does have sort of a plan for that.
Yeah.
So we're sideboarding in Command and Conquers,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. Got Enlightened Strikes in the deck so that if you have to, you can pitch
Yeah.
4 or 5 resources for an Enlightened Strike,
It's
which
possible,
is never nice.
but it keeps some pressure on.
It does, yeah.
But you're right. I think in terms of Lexi, we've currently seen a resurgence of the fuseless Lexi list, haven't we?
Yeah.
Which it goes fast, and you might be looking at 3 arrows a turn, but a lot of those arrows are Bolton shots
Yeah.
um, or searing shots or even infecting shots. I mean, they give you an extra 2 damage, but it's just
Yeah.
damage. I'm not that bothered, right? So, and again, if the Lexi player doesn't know how to play against Katsu and how to block against
Yeah.
Katsu, then you can quickly find yourself dealing 30 plus damage in a turn, and they're like, oh, what's just happened?
Yeah.
Um,
And yeah, I think the scariest thing from the fuseless Lexi is going to be drill shot.
mm,
Um, I think that's quite a scary, maybe remorseless as well, but the pace you're going at, the
yeah,
remorseless sometimes doesn't matter too much. But I think especially if they can get 2 drill shots out and get them on your mask, I think it's a
yeah.
bit,
It takes away. I mean, it takes away your ability to block with the mask, but it also means that you're not tempted into blocking with your mask. So it stays
yeah.
on the field. So I like to look at the positive side of it. That it's just going to
No, I
stay
think
there.
that's a really good point because yeah, there is below 10 life. Should I be blocking? Should I not?
Yeah,
And it takes away another decision because Katsu is all about decisions at the end of the day.
yeah. So Lexi is an interesting matchup. We talked about
Mhm.
Dromai, which is another, I would say, good Katsu matchup.
I think so.
What's your feeling about playing into Dromai, especially the more aggro varieties?
Yeah, I think if they're going aggro, then it's pretty favoured
Mm,
into Katsu. Like the ability to Kadachi for 2 damage that
mm.
may kill either 2 Ash Wings or one of the dragons with 2 life, and then your next attack is then threatening your
Yeah,
mask is just crazy. And especially if they've got a lot of dragons out and you've not got a huge hand,
yeah,
you can change that hand by triggering your Mask of Momentum
yeah,
and can completely transform your turn just because they have played the deck as they're meant to play it.
Yeah, and I think having I don't know if you side in your CNCs for Dramai. It is
Yeah,
nice to have the poppers there, but often you need to be careful about popping a dragon because you might want to kill it and trigger your mask on the next turn, or um,
exactly.
so you have to make another decision about whether to actually use the Phantasm or play the CNC to threaten their arsenal on the next turn. Um,
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think I very rarely pop the
yeah.
dragons because my only poppers are CNC. Um,
Mm.
but they're a tool for Katsu as well as Dramai, essentially, in the
Yeah,
matchup.
it's quite nice. Okay, so those I would say those are fairly positive matchups for Katsu in the meta right now.
Yeah.
Where do you see Katsu's weaknesses in the meta right now?
Um, like I said earlier, I think Ice Lexi
Hmm.
is a pretty tough
Mm.
matchup for Katsu. I think Azalea is very hard for
Okay.
Katsu, although I haven't seen many people playing Azalea since the US
Yeah,
Invitationals before the Pro
it's sort
Tour.
of lost favour in now it's the Lexi Ranger.
Yeah, I think it was very favoured into Azalea before, but which is great that we're not seeing them right.
Yeah, yeah, they've gone. There's a few around. To be fair, I built my current Katsu deck initially to beat Azalea because they were so prevalent.
Yeah.
So I probably play a few more defense reactions against them than I would do otherwise, but it works for that matchup. And again, if you've got things like red in the ledger coming your way,
Yeah.
that's really detrimental to Katsu because you want to be able to put those chains together. I think
Hmm.
I think Azalea was the main reason I put Enlightened Strike back in the deck because
Yeah.
if you've got a 2 card hand, 7 is a pretty good result from that off of 1 attack.
Yeah, definitely.
Um,
I think Enlightened Strike went back in my deck
yeah,
for exactly the same reason.
it's just it's such a good card. It costs a card, or it cycles a card, should I say? But it's so versatile. You can do almost anything you want with it, and you can even often discard it for 0 and go and find a better combo piece, which is great too.
Yeah.
Um,
It feels slightly, oh, maybe I shouldn't be
I
discarding
know
an
it's
Enlightened
such a good
Strike, but
card, but my combo piece is
it
going to
has to
do
be
more
done.
damage. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so I think the big grey elephant in the room is probably Oldham. Um,
Yeah.
what's your gut feeling on that Oldham matchup right now?
My gut feeling is that it's slightly favoured into Katsu if you have the right game plan.
Yeah,
And I said this multiple times on Saturday. You stick to the plan, you do not go away from the plan, and
yeah.
even when you feel like the plan's not working, the plan's working. Just don't
It's a test of patience
stray
almost,
from the
isn't it?
plan. Yeah, so I think I've seen a couple different variations on what the plan should
Hmm.
be. An interesting one that somebody was playing in Baltimore was Mask of Many Faces
Okay.
for the Magenshi. So they
Okay.
would
Yeah.
name any card Mask of Many Faces with Go Again. Yeah, would name it
Yeah.
Magenshi Release and then play their Lord of Wind after. My deck is set up so
Hmm.
that you have the Magenshi, you have the Lord of Wind, you have enough resources,
Yeah.
and you do not break Snapdragon Scalers until you
Until
are
you have,
getting to that stage
yeah.
of the game.
So you have
Um,
potentially um, the Magenshi in Arsenal, the Lord of Wind in hand, and then as
yeah,
many resources, 8, 9, 10 resources as you can muster, and just draw all of
exactly.
those red cards back in. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And another card that we have put into the deck to facilitate the plan is Razor Reflex.
yeah,
Because as soon as your snaps are gone, if
that's
you
it.
can get a cheeky Razor Reflex out there, then
Mm,
they're either blocking 7 because they know it's coming, which
yeah,
at a late stage of the game is
yeah,
great, or you can do it again.
yeah. I think that's fair. I have been trying for the last 2 to 3 weeks to fit Razor back in my deck, and I'm struggling to justify it. Just because I've got I've got Snatch and an E Strike,
Mm-hmm.
which are the two main cards for Razor.
Yeah,
Um, but it I only really need it in the Oldham matchup, just to offer a bit of a different tack, like you say. And I'm just struggling to fit it in for that one matchup. But maybe I just haven't played in a meta where Oldham is that prevalent at the moment. We'll see when my turn for an RTN comes up in a few weeks, so we'll see how I get on.
Yeah,
Um,
I do think it works well into the Lexi matchup
mm,
as well.
okay.
Especially because if they're going to have an off turn or
Yeah.
even a three of a kind turn
Yeah.
where they're going
Yeah.
to draw more cards, they're more likely to block your mass trigger.
Yeah.
And if you, they, I've had a lot of comments that have been like, "Oh, I didn't think Katsus were playing Razor Reflex anymore." I'm
Yeah.
like, well, don't put it to the side yet because then you'll be caught out by one.
You almost need just
Um,
the one to sort of pitch early so they can see it and then they have to respect it.
yeah,
I do like how mental games can play tricks on people. But yeah,
yeah,
I mean, there's no question that Razor Reflex is a great card in Katsu. It's just depending on the list, and I think this is something we'll touch on again when we
hmm
go through some of the cards. There are many different ways to build Katsu, and even with people who like to go aggro Katsu, there are different ways you can take the deck
yeah,
from a
definitely.
base level. Okay, and are there any off meta matchups that you're particularly worried about? So we talked about Dorinthia earlier. I personally think Dorinthia's a much easier matchup for Katsu now than it used to be, and the same with
Yeah,
Bravo. Like Katsu's old foes of Bravo and Dorinthia used to offer a lot of questions, and now I just don't seem to have any problems with them.
yeah. I think I'm in a similar boat to you. I think my biggest off meta worst matchup is going to be Briar, and I don't know if
Yeah.
that's because I haven't figured it out yet, or
Mm,
if because it's just very difficult. Because I'm not seeing many Briars at my local armories. I'm
yeah.
not seeing Briars on Talishar. So when I faced one in the Pro Tour, I was kind of like,
Oh,
"Oh,
yeah.
where have you come
Yeah.
from?"
Uh, and again, when they get their Channel Mount Heroic out, there isn't
hmm
much you can do. Like Katsu's not built to block 10
Yeah,
damage twice a turn. Like you've almost just got to suck it up
yeah,
and go for it on your turn to try and race, but then it's a really hard decision to make to take 15, 20 damage in a turn.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Perfect. Right. So I wondered if you want to just help me go through some of the key ninja cards so that our viewers can get a bit more of an appreciation for Katsu as he is.
Yeah.
So we have our Fabry deck. We're going to start putting cards in a Fabry deck. We're going to start with
hmm
the hero card, Katsu. Um, let's have a quick look at our hero card. Um, Katsu, the hero ability, Lila, you'll know this, says the first time an attack action card you control hits each turn, you may discard a card with cost 0. And we've talked about this already. If you do discard that card, then you can go and search your deck for a card with combo, specifically the keyword combo. You banish that card and shuffle your deck, and you can play that card at any point that turn.
Yeah.
Um, this is what we were talking about earlier, isn't it? With the on hit, every attack action card
Yeah.
potentially. Obviously, if you miss that trigger, that's a key worry for a Katsu player. If you've missed the
Yeah.
first attack action card, sorry, then that's it gone for the turn. If you choose not to
Yeah.
do it, it's gone for the turn.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think it's such a powerful ability as well. And I don't know about you as a Katsu player, but I always like to bait people into it.
Oh,
So
absolutely,
I
100%.
might be holding the Descendant Gust Wave and I might just put my 100 wins in there to see if they'll let it hit and then go and get my full combo line. It's very satisfying when you know they would have blocked the Surging Strike or the Descendant Gust Wave or one of those key pieces that you need to go and find. But
Yeah,
I think the bait that it's on the first hit is always very satisfying.
yeah. No, I do appreciate a cheeky go again attack that doesn't seem relevant, but they think they have to block it anyway, or vice versa. They don't block it because they don't think it's an issue, and then oh, suddenly I've got a surging strike. Oh, what a shame.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I think when we compare the ninjas that are played in Classic Constructed, I think Katsu's hero ability is much more useful, but also much harder to keep track of and plan your turn
Yeah.
around. Um,
Yeah.
it offers more. If Fi is the beginner aggro ninja, then Katsu's taking it to a different level.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I think you do have to remember that you're playing with your graveyard as well as your deck, and do
Hmm.
something into your graveyard that facilitates the rest of your turn.
I do very much at the moment enjoy blocking with Dishonor on turn 1 or turn 0, and then
Right.
suddenly it reappears later in the
Yeah.
game. It's very useful. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a key thing as well, that if the opportunity is there,
Mm,
overblocking turn one isn't the end of the world,
yeah.
because if you can get that dishonor, that fluster fist, even sort of your 100 wins in there
Mm,
early,
yeah. Gives you
that
options
just
further
sets
down
you
there.
up.
And
Yeah.
also, don't forget that when you discard the card for Katsu, that is then in your graveyard. All of the other cards on the chain stay on the chain until the end of the combat chain. But if you've discarded a card like a Dishonor or 100 wins to
Yeah.
go and fetch your combo piece, that then in the graveyard, which is
Yeah.
just perfect. Um, okay, let's take a look at some of the equipment, and I'm going to start with what we've probably agreed is one of the best cards in the game, Mask of Momentum. Um,
Yeah.
Now, there are other choices for the headpiece, and there is no question that Mask of Momentum is one of the more expensive pieces of kit for the ninja deck. But it says, once per turn effect, when an attack action card you control is the third or higher chain link in a row to hit, draw a card. That is every turn. If you can get 3 attacks out, 2 of them probably being Kodachis and the third being an attack action card, it threatens a card draw almost every turn.
Yeah. And yeah, for newer players, what they fail to appreciate is that if you block the third one, then the sixth one will also
Yeah,
trigger it.
yeah,
Which is, as a deck that's super aggro, going super wide,
yeah,
it might be that you can trigger that mask twice, and unless they want to give you their whole hand, there might be nothing they can do about it.
absolutely. It's just so good. I can't say
Yeah.
enough good things about it and the way it makes people play the game. The other 2 options that I've heard about being used currently are the Mask of the Pouncing Lynx,
Hmm.
which is again a triggered effect that when it hits, when an attack action card hits, you can destroy Mask of the Pouncing Lynx and go and find an attack action card with 2 or less base power. Personally, I use this into Icelander still,
Yeah,
um,
me too.
and into Oldham.
Yeah. I've just checked my sideboard guide, and I'm exactly the same
Yeah,
as you, only bringing it into those two. And for me, it's to facilitate your dishonor,
yeah,
which is super important
yeah,
into Icelander, and for Oldham, a double bonds turn.
yeah, yeah. I think we're on the same lines. I think you sometimes you can get baited into using it too early, but if you
Yeah,
can leave it until the later game, um, having that ability to basically almost draw another card. It's banish zone, but if you go over by 1 with an ancestral empowerment, for example, and get the hit, then you can go and find your dishonor, or even as I think you run a blue bonds, for example, you can go and find the
hmm,
bonds and get that done.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. And oh,
no, you
sorry.
go ahead.
I was going to say that I also don't hate blocking with it into Oldham.
Yeah.
I think probably the other headpiece is going to be Crown of Providence.
Uh, I,
Um,
so no, I wasn't going to say crown actually.
okay,
I've gone fully ninja on the headpieces, but
okay.
we can talk about Crown of Providence as well. I
Oh,
I'm not sure I see Crown of Providence as a ninja staple.
no, I have seen people playing it, but I do appreciate that you can fix hands with it.
Mm,
But I think Mask of Pouncing Lynx is going to block for the exact same value,
yeah,
but you do have that added text if you need
yeah,
it. So that's why it's not in my list.
yeah. No, I don't run it. There are too many. I mean, the Mask of Momentum blocks for 2, the Mask of Pouncing Links blocks for 2. They're both better
Yeah.
options in terms of their abilities. The only other card we've talked about is the Mask of Many Faces, which is an instant. It costs 1 and allows you to name your next attack action card, whatever you want it to be. So that can fix hands. That can give you the combo
Yeah.
piece that you've not got, even making it a starter for your combo
Yeah,
line, which is less important. I think now we've got the Descendant Gust Waves with Innate go again,
yeah,
but even still, if you can put something before that, like 100 winds that you've named Surging Strike, you could potentially add another 2 damage to the chain from your Descendant Gust Wave.
yeah, definitely. I think right now in CC, the other options are more powerful.
Mm.
I was um absolutely loving it in draft.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
it's great.
if I saw one, I was taking that.
Yeah, it's all well. I think for cats, if you're going Katsu in Outsiders draft, I think it's almost pack one, pick one.
100%, yeah.
It allows you to fix things, and especially in a draft deck where you might be struggling for consistency, I think it is
Hmm.
perfect. Um,
Yeah.
so those are our 3 or 4 headpiece options. Let's move down to the arm slot. Um,
Hmm.
I personally run the breaking scales as standard. I don't know
Yeah.
about you.
Yep. Breaking scales are standard, and then the Van Brace is coming in just for Oldham.
They're so good. People are sleeping on Van Brace. I think it's such a good card. We'll come back to the Van Brace in a minute, but the breaking scales basically allows us to attack, react, give a combo card +1. Now, I'm not sure the days of winning games on sneaky breaking scales are completely done, but
They're not.
people are generally a little bit better at blocking them than they used to be. I've still won a few recently where you just go, "Oh, I'm really sorry, but you're dead now," and
Yeah.
it's
I'll
quite satisfying.
take you back to my Pro Tour round one against
Okay.
my Dorinthia, who, yeah, I'm sure if he does watch this, he'll be kicking himself because he certainly was
Okay.
at the table where I did kill him with breaking
Oh,
scales.
it's so satisfying as a Katsu player. Um,
Yeah.
the other benefit of that is it battle worn 1. I mean, it's a
Hmm.
common and it's battle worn 1, and it does this amazing +1 at any point of the game where you need it. So
Yeah.
it's for me, it's a standard. Um, we talked about the Van Braces, and I'll pop those in when I get to the generic equipment. But I guess the other option, depending on how you build your Katsu deck, is Tiger Stripe Shuko. Now,
Yeah.
I don't think that the main combo lines have enough two powered cards, 2 or less powered
I
cards,
don't.
to give you consistency with Tiger Stripe. It does block 2 though. I mean, that an arm piece that blocks 2 is quite useful. Um,
Yeah. And I have seen Katsu decks in the current meta
mm,
built with Shuko.
mm,
Those decks tend to have sort of a lot more yellows,
yes.
which for me at that point,
You're almost
wouldn't you rather play
hamstringing
the red?
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So I see the value, but I think for me, breaking scales just it threatens it every time there's a break point.
it's so thematic. It works.
Hmm.
Um, now we talked about Van Braces, and I'm just trying to find the Van Braces because this is a where's it gone? There it is. This is an Outsiders legendary, a generic, and remarkably, as an attack reaction, once per turn, cost 1, the next prevention effect that prevents damage, or physical
Hmm.
damage, should I say, this turn prevents less of this damage, 1 less of this damage. So it doesn't block for anything
Unless you pay for it.
unless you pay for it. So you can use it every turn if you wanted to as an attack reaction to remove one of the opponent's prevention effects,
Hmm.
and you can also defend with it and pay to give it +1 defense and blade break. I think people are sleeping on this card as a generic legendary. It's been ridiculously cheap on the market, and against Oldham, it
Yeah.
negates their Crown of Siege prevention, which is an extra damage per turn on your Kadachi.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's been key to my Oldham matchups. It's just there's never a point where I'm like, oh, I wish I had breaking scales here.
Yeah.
Like it's just so good into the
Yeah.
matchup that the what the best arm piece should be, in my opinion, just cannot be in that matchup.
Yeah. It does everything you need it to do in that specific matchup. Um,
Yeah.
I've also seen other heroes playing it, like Dramai, for example, playing it for Ash generation, which is an
Oh,
interesting.
okay.
Yeah. consistent, but maybe a waste compared to what they have elsewhere.
Yeah, I think the way we'd been thinking about Van Brace was it's sort of an extra Kodachi. It's are
Yeah,
you going to block that
yeah,
one or get another damage through? Like it just
yeah,
elongates that damage that you can actually
yeah.
put into Oldhim because when they're full fatigue, it's just so hard to meet those breaking points.
Well, as you say rightly, you don't have to activate it on the Kodachi where they use the Crown of Seeds. You can leave it
Yeah,
for later on if they're going to block it out physically, then you could maybe catch them by surprise later on.
yeah.
Um, are there any other arm pieces that you would consider?
Um, I think we toyed with the idea of no rune gloves at one point
Mm,
for the Kano and Icelander
hmm.
matchups. But in my list, I think the Arcane Lantern instead of one of your Kodachis is just much more efficient. So that's why that's in there. Haven't really considered any other arm pieces,
Okay.
but always open to
Well,
suggestions.
no, I mean you, as you point out there, our chat earlier this week actually prompted me to put Arcane Lantern back in my list. I had gone to Null Rune Gloves, but
Mm-hmm.
I think especially against Kano, you're not going to be able to block out everything they're throwing at you. So you need to go fast,
Yeah.
and the breaking scales gives you the chance to just go over and trigger that mask when you need it to sometimes, and swing the matchup in your favour a bit more quickly than
Yeah.
another Kodachi.
Yeah, and you're also saving your resources on your
Yeah,
Kodachis to block that arcane.
yeah. So I like the idea of an arcane lantern, and I'm going to pop that in the deck right now because it's there, and again it takes a weapon slot, and it's got arcane barrier 1. So as you
Yeah.
say, you've not got a second Kodachi, but you can block some arcane damage.
Yeah.
All right, what are your picks for the legs?
I love Snapdragon Scalers. I think it's so powerful. It is a toss up in this list and other lists I've seen between Snapdragon Scalers
Mm,
and Breeze Rider Boots.
yeah,
I think for me, Snapdragon Scalers has to be in the list for Oldham,
yeah, okay,
um, whether or not it's a sideboard piece or not.
yeah,
Um, but I just think that Snapdragon Scalers, especially because I'm playing cards like Snatch
yeah,
and late game, I hate to do it, but if you have to break it on a Whelming Gust Wave to get
yeah,
your combo line
yeah,
off, then you're just not relying on things to hit. Because if they see that your Breeze Rider boots are still in play,
mm,
you're getting late into the game, you're getting a low deck, they're going to be more inclined to block out.
yeah. They are, to me, they were the original leg piece that I would use for Katsu. Like there was no
Yeah,
question until recently whether I would use Snapdragon Scalers because they're just so versatile. You can decide to use them early game to go for, like if they've got no cards in hand, they've blocked everything out, and you've got a free 5 or 10 damage coming their way. Then sure, push it through. Most of the time, you'll wait till they're under 10 life and you're threatening their whole hand every turn.
yeah,
Sometimes you're going to have a bricky type hand with no go again at the end of the chain, and you just want to extend it that one more card, and they often block without thinking about, oh, they've got snapdragons, they can go
yeah.
again. So
Yeah, and I think saying this though, the match that I lost on Saturday, Matt was playing the Breeze Rider boots into me, and I think he did a double bonds turn.
yeah,
So he was going again, going again, going again, and killing me with the Winds of Eternity.
yeah,
Because I think it was a dishonor that
okay.
um had the go again, and completely forgot he broke Breeze Rider boots on the
On
first
the
attack
first
of the
attack,
chain.
yeah,
And I was like, I didn't have any cards in hand, didn't have any equipment left, so there's nothing I could do about it. But I was
oh,
like, oh, this is the perfect situation for Breeze
yeah.
Rider boots. And I appreciate and respect them a
So
little bit more than I probably had done previously.
yeah, so I have moved to the Breeze Rider boots as my standard boot in my list. Again, it's very list dependent, and
Yeah,
I like the fact that it's got Battle Worn 1, I think
Hmm.
against the Lexis with their on hits and against some of the other Azalea, for example, who are threatening big on hits with dominate, I think it is useful.
Yeah.
Um, but in a world where a lot of my attacks have go again as standard, the ones that I really want to go again are the end of the chain to either have a double dishonor turn or a
Yeah.
extend a Winds of Eternity chain. So, for example, one of my favourite things to do, if it pans out that way, is have a full dishonor line, which they obviously
Hmm.
block the dishonor, and you've broken the Breeze Rider boots, and then come in with a dishonor for 2, which they can't block because they've
Yeah.
blocked everything out, and because because dishonor isn't conditional on having the +2 effect to be active for its second
Hmm.
effect, which is taking away your hero ability. Um, if you can't block that too, they get dishonored anyway.
Yeah.
So the other favourite of mine is if you manage to get a Megenshi off and get 3 Lord of Winds, sometimes you don't have the cards to go and fetch from graveyard, or you don't want to spend those resources, especially if you've got maybe an Art of War on. So coming in for 3
Hmm.
versions of 3 is quite a nice way to end that chain if you've
Yeah.
broken the Breeze Rider boots. But it does require a ninja attack action card to hit to be able
Yeah.
to activate. So it is a triggered effect on hit for a ninja attack action card, which can be a bit clunky
Yeah.
in some matchups. Like you say, in Oldham, where they're going to block almost everything anyway, you can't guarantee that that's going to go. So the snaps is probably better.
Yeah.
But I'm going to put it in our sideboard here as we're building. Now, I think I have 2 options for the chess piece. I don't know if you would
Okay.
pick. I don't know if we're on the same page or not. What's your go-to chess piece for Katsu at the moment?
Go to has to be Heart and Cross Strap.
Good, we're on the
Um,
same page. We're there.
I think it's an extra card in hand on your maybe 5 card
Yeah,
turn. And to me, that's just invaluable to having a free Surging Strike.
yeah. Well, it's a common, and it says action: destroy the Heart and Cross Trap. The next attack action card you play this turn costs 2 less to play, and it has go again. So with Katsu though, you have to be careful when you activate it.
Yeah.
So I generally leave it till I have the Surging Strike line, at least 2 pieces that I can just go off.
Yeah.
Because if you play a chain link and then activate it, you've broken the chain. So you're
Yeah.
destroying your mask potential maybe. Are there any cheeky ways that you've managed to use it recently, or is it always a surging?
I think it's always a surge, and
Mm,
sometimes it might be the spinning wheel kick,
okay.
and that's probably a
Yeah.
late game where
Yeah.
I'm trying to close it out,
Yeah.
and I want to keep maybe a 0 in hand to
Okay.
discard. Um, but I think, as you say about the chain links, making sure you break it before you could atches
Mm,
is important, because you want that
yeah.
surge, and if it's going to be your third attack,
You want
to
it to
be
be the
your
big
mass
mask
trigger.
trigger. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So I agree. I think Heart and Cross Trap is an instant include at the moment for me. Um, I personally do have a sideboard chess piece for the longer matchups.
Me too.
And
And
is
that
it an expensive card?
is
Yeah. So I
sort of
Tunic,
yeah,
very good. So Findle Spring Tunic, we all know and love. It's gone up in value again recently, and there's been lots of social media chatter about the expense of Flesh and Blood, and I think a lot of it comes around this card in particular.
yeah,
It's been reprinted twice, once or twice now, and it's still expensive. But
yeah. I think it is a fundamental part of most decks, though.
yeah,
Um, like
as you say,
there's
it's a generic. It can go in anything.
yeah. I think, like you say, it's for those longer matchups. I am bringing it in against Oldham.
Hmm.
Um, bring it in against Icelander.
Mm-hmm.
And I think against Icelander, being able to pay for that Coronet Peak with your tunic is again very
Yeah, it's
satisfying.
really. It's like, oh, I'll just do that. Sorry, I've still got a 5 card hand.
Yeah, I was in Baltimore bringing it in against Ramai just
Mm,
in case they were fatigue.
okay.
But I think at the weekend I was using cross
Yeah.
strap just because it doesn't have as much power,
Mm,
but it does have the block value.
yeah.
And like you say, if it's going to be a long game, those ones are probably going to add up to more than two.
Yeah. I tend to play it like you say, Oldham, Icelander, and Azalea. Uh,
Yeah.
and the Bravo
Mm,
Dorinthia less commonly, but I do put it in there. I think having it, as you say, to pay for the Coronet Peak, or even in your longer but still aggro matchups like Bravo and Dorinthia, having it to pay for an Art of War
yeah.
is handy. Um, but I do, and the one block again against Dominate against Azalea can be invaluable.
Yeah.
Um, I do, however, like to play Heart and Cross Trap into Lexi. I think it gives
Yeah.
you a lot of options, including being able to activate to pitch away your Frostbite. So
Yes.
um, it's a zero cost activation, allowing you to then, depending on your hand, get two resources almost. So that's quite a nice, nifty little thing you can do against Lexi if they're piling on the Frostbites.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're I've heard people using blazing your eye
Yeah.
in the fine matchup specifically, but it blocks 5 against maybe a lava burst, um, but really it's not available for the first mass trigger, which is probably where I'd want it.
Yeah, and it's also taking up a slot for a matchup that you
Yeah,
probably aren't going to face right now.
yeah,
Like if we're being realistic. Um,
yeah. Slightly off meta. Although Fi did win an RTN at the weekend. It was a double ninja
yeah,
weekend in the UK.
yeah,
So, I mean, maybe there's a resurgence. I don't know. I just don't see Fi as being as versatile at the moment.
yeah.
Okay, so the only other piece of equipment I would throw in, we didn't talk about it on the legs, is the tide flippers. I don't know if you run
Yeah.
those as well.
Yes, I do run tide flippers. And it is just for your arcane
Yeah,
barrier. Like you may use the ability against Icelander if you're getting
yeah,
super late in the game and you've got a huge life lead, but very unlikely to be
it,
used for anything other than
yeah.
arcane barrier.
And the same against Viscerai. I run it.
Yes.
Again, I'm not going to use it for the go again unless it's the kill turn, but
Yeah.
they're useful for that. Good. So we've got 2 pieces of arcane barrier maximum. We've got 6 sideboard equipment and 4 main board equipment. The things we are not talking about just yet are our only weapons, the
Yeah.
harmonized Kodachi.
Yeah. I think they're just so good, right?
They just
Like
make the whole thing tick.
make it work.
They, I understand why Rob, for example, played Fi with the Searing Ember Blade.
Yeah.
2 for 3 is generally better than 2 for 2. Like
Hmm.
there is an incremental advantage there. But when you are trying to extend the chains and trying to trigger the mask, the Kodachis are just phenomenally good at.
Yeah.
You don't have to use them both together. You can spread them out. You can start a new chain with it. They're so versatile.
Yeah. And I think if I had Draconic Kodachis, you would
Mm,
obviously play those over the Searing Ember Blade.
yeah, that would be
Um,
dangerous, wouldn't it?
it would be
Jeez.
dangerous. Maybe it would bring five back up to the top.
Mm,
But yeah, they just facilitate everything Katsu's trying
yeah.
to do.
So I heard, I don't know if you heard the same rumor on the grapevine. I heard people talking about strategy when Azalea got really strong, and melting point is obviously a thing. I heard
Hmm.
people talking about using the Edge of Autumn as your primary weapon into Azalea,
Okay.
which because it's a two-handed sword, um, costs 1, has go again, does 1 damage. They can't be targeted by melting point. Now,
Hmm.
this is a complete aside, but my argument to that is why would you hamstring yourself from beginning of the game when they might not even get a melting point off. Like I
Yeah.
don't, I get the cleverness behind it. I get the thinking process, but why? Why would you take away one of your Kodachis just to start the game?
Yeah. And essentially, if you have got that melting point turn, that I guess sometimes it's going to be dominated, but just block out,
Just
right? And
block
then
it.
move on.
It's fine. Okay, so that's sorry. That's all of our equipment. Um, any honourable mentions? Anything you thought about putting in that's not there? Did you ever go down a flick knives rabbit hole?
I didn't, but I do have respect for it.
Mm,
I have respect for it more in Blitz than in CC.
okay,
But yeah, it never made it into the list because I think those Kodachis are too important to be
to be going
throwing
throwing
them at
away,
people.
as it were. Okay, good. Right. So, where do you want to start, Lila? What um, majestics are you gonna start low? Or should we start with majestics, or should we start with the actual combo line starters? What combo lines are you gonna run in your ideal Katsu deck?
I think there is a main combo line in the theme of my deck, and um, Bonds coming out just elevated the whole
Mm,
deck. I think having a Gust Wave with Go Again built in, amazing.
it's crazy, isn't it?
Um, Bonds to go and get another card on a deck that already can get multiple cards per turn, great. I think the main combo line that makes my deck work in particular is the bonds. And if you can double bonds
Yeah.
or get that dishonor off, I did have a match recently where I dishonored a Bolton and the rest of the game for them was very,
It's
very miserable.
bleak. Yes.
Um, but yeah, I think that is the foundations of this deck
Mm.
and everything else is built around it.
So obviously we're talking about the starter being Surging Strike,
Yeah,
which as a red is cost 2, 5, go again. Very
yeah.
simple. Um,
It could also be like water, which
it,
is also featured in my deck.
we're going to come back to that one. Followed by Descendant Gustwave, which is cost 1, 3 damage with innate go again.
Yeah,
And if Surging Strike, the combo keyword is if Surging Strike was the last attack this combat chain, costs 1 less to play and does 2 attack extra. So
yeah.
potentially a 0 for 5 in the right situation. And then the card that we all know and love now from Outsiders is Bonds of Ancestry.
Hmm.
It's a 2-cost card. The combo does 4 damage in a red and says if a card with Gust Wave in the name was the last attack in this combat chain, this costs 2 less to play and has go again. And the best bit of the whole thing, when this attacks, you may banish a card with combo from your graveyard. If you do, search your deck for a card of the same name, not necessarily the same pitch variety,
No.
banish it, shuffle, and you may play it this combat chain. So it's slightly different to Katsu's effect. You can only play it this combat chain,
Yeah.
and you have to have it in graveyard to be, sorry, both in graveyard and in deck to go and find something. I will admit to having tried banish something from graveyard and then not being able to find it in deck. That's quite embarrassing.
Yeah. I
Um,
think one thing that's also worth mentioning here, which I have done, is seeing the Surging Strike in hand after you've done your bonds and
yeah.
thinking, oh, I'll go again, break my cross strap.
Yes,
Combat chain
exactly.
closes and you lose your banished card.
I've
So that's
also done
something
that.
also to watch out for.
It's embarrassing.
It
Um,
is.
but as you alluded to, this is a new addition to an already established combo line. Um,
Yeah.
Now, the Surging Strike used to be paired with Whelming Gust Wave,
Hmm.
which offers a potential card draw,
Yeah.
but does not have an 8 go again.
No.
So your 0 cost Whelming Gust Wave is 0 cost all the time. It either does 3 or 4 damage, and if it has combo, it does have a go again and a potential card draw. But having this Descendant Gust Wave now with innate go again just means that if you don't have the Surging, but you have the Gust Wave and the bonds, you can still do a mini combo line.
Yeah. And it's going to be fairly big as well, as long as you've got something nice in your graveyard to go and
Yeah,
find.
yeah. It's great. And the fact that Bonds works with both Whelming and Descendant Gustwave is it's just phenomenal.
Yeah.
The options that you've got are great.
Yeah,
Now,
definitely. I think my preference for the gust waves is Whelming, even though that
yeah,
doesn't facilitate your dishonors. But that card draw is just, especially if that's your second chain link, and then you're also threatening one on your third. Um,
yeah,
by the end of the game, you might have drawn two, three, four cards.
yeah, absolutely. And as you say, combining it with the Mars trigger is it's lovely.
Yeah.
Okay, now um, it might depend on what stage of the game you are as to whether you go for your Whelming or Descendant, and it might
Yeah.
depend on whether you've got a Dishonor in Graveyard, because obviously the
Yeah.
Dishonor only triggers with Descendant Gustwave, not with the Whelming Gustwave, but it is very context sensitive. The natural follow-on to Whelming, the original follow-on to Whelming, was the Magenshi release.
Yeah.
That is a yellow pitch card, costs one, um, and the combo says if Whelming Gustwave was the last attack this combat chain, Magenshi release gains +1, so then coming in for 5 with Go Again, and if it hits, search your deck for any number of cards named Lord of Wind, reveal them, put them in your hand, and shuffle your deck. I mean,
Yeah.
if that's a must block. If that hits at any point,
Right.
it's danger, isn't it?
Yeah, I am only sideboarding in the
Yeah.
Magenshi. I
Okay.
think prior to Outsiders, it was Katsu's bread and butter.
Yeah.
It was how he won the games. Um, but I do think the Bonds line is stronger, but I think you need the Magenshi line for
For certain
your fatigue
matchups.
matchups,
Yeah.
like 100%.
I mean, being able to recur 6+ cards in one attack
Yeah.
and do 8 damage plus in the Lord of Wind is crazy.
Yeah. And
So
it just
very useful.
makes your deck so clean at the end of the game
Yeah.
because you've got all your blues that you pitched for your
Yeah.
Kodachis
Yeah.
with your red
Yeah.
surgeons in there, your red Whelmings.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's very nice.
But you do need a blue pitch ideally so that you can pay the 2 for the Surging and the 1 for the Magenshi.
Yeah.
It doesn't leave with the Descendant and with the Bonds. You often have space for a Kodachi at the beginning of the chain. Otherwise, if you're going to go with Magenshi, you need that 1 pitch, or even sometimes with the Tunic, you can pay for it off the Tunic.
Yeah.
Now, before we go on to the finishers for those two combo chains, you mentioned Be Like Water, which I think is a great versatile pick for Katsu now. It's a 0 cost, 3 Go Again, and it says when this hits, you may pay 1. If you do, choose Head Jab, Surging Strike, or Twin Twisters. This gains the chosen name. So potentially, this is a 1 cost Surging Strike.
Yeah, exactly.
When I play this, if the opponent doesn't block it for 3, I wonder what's going on, because I just don't understand how this is not a must block.
I think I very rarely pay for it because everybody blocks it,
Yeah,
which for
yeah.
me is great because I'm taking cards out of your hand.
And it just offers so much. Obviously, if you're only playing the Surging line, you're only going to call it Surging Strike, but
Yeah.
it can change your whole turn if they let it hit. Now, they don't have to let it hit. We do have some tools to try and push that damage over, one of which being Ancestral Empowerment. I do tend to run all 3.
Yeah, I run all 3, I think, especially in my list that is majority ninja
Yeah,
cards. It's a must, I think. Playing it on Be Like Water,
yeah,
playing it on your Whelming Gust Wave. I think people tend
yeah,
to block 5 and
yeah,
you go Ancestral Breaking
yeah.
Scales.
Sorry
And
about
they're like,
that.
oh
Card draw.
no.
Now 2 card draw.
Yeah. Also getting that extra card can fix your hand. It's a 0. You can discard it for Katsu if you
Yeah,
need to. It just does everything.
it's a
And it's
good
block 3.
option. It blocks 3 because it's a
Yes.
majestic. Yeah, I agree. a fantastic card. I struggle to see a Katsu deck without it. It's just so
Yeah.
versatile, and I love it. But my favourite thing is playing it on top of a Be Like Water, and then using the card that you draw to pay for the Be Like Water. It sort of fixes the whole hand.
Yeah.
Now, with back to Be Like Water very quickly, because I do something a little bit controversial in my deck. I play blue Be Like Water.
Okay.
I had a bit of they only block two,
Yeah.
but they are zero cost blues, and I love the look on an opponent's face when you play a one power attack that could then become a surging strike, because when all their equipment's gone and you've been pitching these blues all game,
Yeah.
when they have to spend a card to block, it's quite useful. But I know it's not for everyone, and because it's only a 2 block, it annoys people. But
Yeah. I
just
think that's
something to bear
probably
in
why
mind.
it's not made the cut, but also it doesn't have combo.
Yeah,
Um, so not being able to
yeah, to
get
go
one
and get
off
one.
yeah.
100 Wins was my other blue choice, 2 block blue choice, but I just found the utility, the threat of the Be Like Water was
Yeah,
perfect.
definitely.
Now let's finish off these combo lines with our blue. They're both blue finishers. They're both
Yeah.
blue zero cost finishers because Katsu is thematic like that. We have 3 Dishonor, and this is a game changer. I think when this was previewed and it came in as a card that had a whole game effect,
Yeah.
I didn't really understand how powerful that could be against some heroes.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly right. Like I am going to say, I think the worst hero for it to happen to is Bolton, unfortunately. Um, but even doing it to Alexi, like the inability to flip over your arsenal is just
Yeah,
detrimental to
yeah,
their game plan. Um, and I found in the Lexi matchup as well that neither of you want to block. As soon as
yes,
one of you starts blocking, you've lost the game. You're not going to block that dishonor? Okay, well, you lose the game anyway.
yeah. I think Lexis are prone to underestimating how much this changes their game plan. And as you've said, if you
Yeah,
can't flip with Lexi, you can't really make much use of New Horizons,
no,
and therefore Voltaire becomes a bit of an issue. Um,
yeah,
Arsenaling at the end of turn is then a liability, and you lose your whole game plan. So,
yeah,
yeah, yes, Dishonor takes a lot to line up, but having played with it for 500 odd matchups now, I get it off more than I think I would.
yeah. And I think it's also a little bit of a red herring card because
Mm,
people that don't play against Katsu don't read the
yeah,
card.
yeah.
And they think
It's
that
always live.
because you're playing it and
Yeah,
because it's pumped, it's turned on.
yeah,
So I've had people blocking 7 on a dishonor
yeah.
and
And
it's
it
not even turned on.
no, because you've only played the Descendant and the
Yeah,
Bonds, and then it's another 4 damage, and you think, well, that's the best option I've got for my graveyard. I'll play it, and
yeah,
they overblock it, and you're just like, yes,
yeah, yeah. I think it's similar to Mask where it's got all these underlying
mm,
factors as well that make it great rather than just the text that's written on it.
absolutely agree. I absolutely agree with that card. And then the other blue finisher we have is Lord of Wind. Um, Now, if for nothing else, it's a 3 block blue card that costs 0. Um,
Yeah,
the chances that you're going to get one off in the game is relatively slim unless you're playing the, as you said, the Magenshi snaps option
yeah,
to guarantee it. But it's a phenomenal card. Like, again, sorry, I don't think the viewers can read it because there's so much text on the box. But it basically says that when you play this, if it's got combo with Magenshi Release being the previous card, you may pitch additional cost to play Lord of Wind. If you do, shuffle X number of cards named Surging Strike, Whelming Gustwave, and or Magenshi Release from your graveyard into your deck, and then Lord of Wind gets plus X. I mean,
yeah,
go and get all your red cards. So even if you had 6 pitch extra, 2 blues, you can go and get 3 red Surgings and 3 red Whelmings from your graveyard
Yeah.
and now Lord of Wind's coming for 8.
Yeah. And you've just improved the quality of your remaining
Yeah,
deck.
and because Magenshi, if it hits, allows you to get as many copies of Lord of Wind as still left in your deck and put them in hand, you've usually got pitch to do it.
Yeah, exactly. I do think that so I'm not mainboarding the
No.
Magenshis. So they are generally pitch cards or block
Yeah.
cards.
Yeah.
If you are going the Magenshi line, don't be tempted to block with them because then you're
No.
taking them out of your deck. It's
Yeah.
so nice to block with them, but
Yeah.
it just
It has
worsens your end
ramifications.
game plan. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, okay, so we're already 27 cards just with the reds and the main reds and the combo line finishers,
Mhm.
plus the ancestral empowerments. Do you run any other, or would you suggest running any other colors of your main combo line?
So I run a single yellow bonds and a single blue bonds.
Okay.
Um, the blue bonds, it's there. I'm not a huge fan of it, if I'm honest, because it's not a zero cost to pitch for Kodachis.
Yes.
But if you're getting towards the end of the game,
Yeah.
like you've got enough gust wave cards that it might just tip you over the edge.
Fine.
It also works very well with your bouncing links.
Yeah, the blue one definitely
Um,
does with a 2 power. Um,
yeah.
I run 2 yellows. No, 1
Okay.
yellow. 1 yellow. I don't run a blue, but I can see why you do.
Yeah, I think the yellow, you like it's exact similar argument. You're running so many gust
Yeah.
waves. Yellow's not that bad. Like the
It's not.
blue isn't great when you have to play it, but the yellow isn't that
And the
bad. Like,
yellow, if you trick someone into blocking just 3 on the yellow and then have breaking scales to go over, that's quite nice as well.
yes.
I do. In fact, actually, instead of running 2 yellow bonds, I run 1 yellow bonds and 1 yellow descendant.
Okay.
Just to give you that flexibility in where you're going. Otherwise, I do run the 3 blue whelming gust waves as well because they're 0
Yep,
cost
me too.
blues.
Yeah.
So
I also have 3 yellow surgeons,
okay,
just to get starters for that line.
and again, I do the same. You can never have enough surging strikes.
No.
I draw the line at blues. I'm not running blues, but because they only come in for 3.
Yeah. It's not a good rate when it's 2 for 3. 2 for 4 is not too bad because of what it facilitates.
Exactly. So I'm gonna leave the extra bonds and descendants out for now, just to see if we have any space when we've put all of our target cards in.
Hmm.
But we are already with the blue whelmings and the yellow surgings. We're already up to 33 cards. So Surging Strike, as we've said, is our main combo line. We've got that in the deck. We've got both lines, and the variety that they offer you is fantastic. The flexibility they offer you is fantastic. Do you
Yeah.
run any other full combo lines in your Katsu deck?
I run one other full combo line, although it doesn't feel like a combo line
Yeah.
to me because
Okay.
it's never
You never use it
chain,
as
chain,
a
chain,
combo.
chain,
Yeah,
chain.
yeah.
It's the 100 Winds of Eternity
Okay.
line.
Good to hear because
Um,
I run that too.
so I'm running the 3 red 100 Winds and the 3 blue Winds of Eternity.
And again, there we go. There's 100 wins. When you look at these cards, they seem quite innocuous. They're not. They're 0 cost. 3 go again. 100 wins in the red. They don't look crazy powerful, but then suddenly you've got 2 in the same hand, or you've arsenaled 1 from the turn before, or you go and get 1 on your Katsu trigger, and
Yeah.
suddenly you're coming in for 3 plus 4 plus maybe another 4 from Winds of Eternity, and off of
Yeah.
0 pitch, that's actually reasonable.
Yeah, exactly. And I think my favorite mechanic for using 100 Winds right now is to discard it with Katsu and then
Mm.
go and get it with bombs.
Yeah, I love it. It's so good.
And then your Winds of Eternity on the end, which was a 2 power attack that's
Yeah,
now 4 on the end of a long chain link.
and it gets you some card recursion, which most people forget about.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, Winds of Eternity is the finisher. Again, it's blue, 0 cost, 3 block, and it says it gets +2 with combo if 100 Winds was the last card, and when it hits, shuffle all the cards named 100 Winds on your combat chain into your deck. I mean, what's not to like? It's 6 cards that do it. They're not the main feature of the deck, but they make the deck work more consistently.
Yeah, definitely. They just again have so many more words written on them than are
Yes,
actually written.
yes. Good. Now, I used to run the leg tap line.
Okay.
I don't anymore. And the reason I used to run it is because it was cheap damage. Potentially, you're looking at 1 for 4 in your leg taps.
Hmm.
And then the rising knee thrust was a potential 0 for 5.
Yeah.
But I think in our current situation, with the cards that we have available to us, they're not offering enough.
No, I don't think there's room for the line.
Um,
Um, it's a great line. Like getting a blackout kickoff
yeah,
is
I mean,
always
1 for
great.
7 is great, right? I mean, no
Yeah.
one's arguing that. Um,
Um,
the other combo lines I hear people talking about, you mentioned Rushing River, Flood of Force. Um, Flood of Force is a yellow, and Breaking Tide as well.
yeah.
So Rushing River is a Torrent of Tempo line.
Yeah.
And Flood of Force, where's it gone? Sorry, I'm looking for the art. Oh, it's on the other page. Allows you to, so Flood of Force allows you to reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a card with combo, put it into your hand, and Flood of Force gains +3. So it comes in for
Hmm.
4, go again, and you've got an extra card draw. And then Break Tide, if Rushing River or Flood of Force was the last attack, it gains +3 and Dominate. And when it hits, banish the top card of your deck. Until the end of your next turn, you may play it. So those both offer card draw. One of them offers banish.
Yeah.
Um, they are, in my eyes, they are blitz cards, or maybe even Benji
Yeah.
cards specifically at the
I
moment.
think Benji cards. Yeah. Um, yeah. I have played a Katsu list with them
Mm,
before. Um, but they don't seem to gel
no,
in this current build or current meta because I think, especially just raw damage,
yeah.
isn't quite enough to get you there right
Mm.
now. So that's why they're not featured in my list.
I think another key factor for these combo lines specifically, um, so the Torrent of Tempo line and then also the Soulbead Strike line, they
Yeah,
are conditional go again on hit. So I I don't think Soulbead Strike and Torrent of Tempo are bad cards. I think they
no,
do a job. And actually, in many of my previous decks, I've played Soulbead Strike, for example, because it's 0 for 4, go again on hit, and it makes people
yeah,
think about blocking. But if you can't guarantee that you have go again for the next combo piece, it really takes away any consistency from your deck.
yeah, definitely. I think I'm on exactly the same
Mm,
page as you, and I wouldn't want to keep hold of my Snapdragon Scalers for
no,
a Torrent of Tempo or um, what's
Soulbead.
the other one? Soulbeat Strike.
Yeah. Now, the Soulbead Strike line does have the ultimate payoff of a Zen State token.
Yeah,
So if you manage to play the whole line, including the Find Center, which, by the way, is a gorgeous card, um, you potentially, if Find Center hits, you're potentially making a Zen State token, which reduces the damage from each attack the opponent plays by 1 for 2 turns.
yeah,
Now, I used to play this before the errata of how you could block it. I used to play this definitely in a Katsu deck because even with a blue crane dance into
hmm,
a Find Center, you could potentially get that Zen State token, and playing against Viserai, playing against Chain, um,
yeah,
playing against another Katsu, you did ridiculous damage to their turns for 2 turns in a row. Um,
yeah. I think it was magnificent into the sky.
Yeah, exactly.
It was so good.
Take away any rune chance. Um,
Yeah.
but I think again, Viscerite is a strong hero, and we've had on our channel on Push the Point, we've had Zach Bunn come and talk about um, Viscerite and the resurgence of Viscerai, but he's still not being played in enough volume to make that a change to the deck.
No. And I did find with it when I was playing that line that the Viserai player blocks out for 2 turns while it
Yeah,
stays
yeah,
around and saves up all their rune
yeah,
chance. And then you're in a maybe worse
yes,
situation.
yeah. So
So
when they,
whilst it was great, and if it was played towards the end of the game, you
mm,
took complete control of the game. If it was played too early, you're just
you're stuck.
elongating the game.
Yeah. Um, good. So I mean, those are other lines that Katsu players could consider, other directions the
Mm-hmm.
deck could go in. Are there any ninja cards that you play that aren't whole combo lines? I'm thinking specifically of Fluster Fist right now.
Yeah. So I think Flusterfist is one of my favourite cards in
Is
this
it?
deck because you look at my deck list and you think, why is that
Yeah.
there? Like, why is that there? It's not got any of the combo pieces, doesn't have go again. Why is it there? So I played 2 red and 3 blue.
Okay.
The blues for pitching and discarding.
Yeah.
The reds for I don't want to waste my dishonors right now. Let's go and get a 0 for 4 off bonds.
Yeah. I
And I
mean,
think it just I don't think there is another. I think we've tried to look for one, and there isn't another 0 for 4 combo card
no,
that works in the same way.
no. I like the card. Personally, I don't play it in my deck because I'm greedy, and if I'm doing a Bonds of Ancestry turn, I don't want the chain to end on a Fluster Fist. I want to go again with Descendant or Whelming or whatever.
Yeah,
So I have filled those slots with other things, but I think the 0 for 4, you can't lie. Coming in for uh, basically with Bonds a 0 for 8, if you
yeah,
include the Dishonor or the Fluster Fist, is incredible value.
yeah. And yeah, I would say it just fills in the gaps for
Mm,
when you don't have that dishonor or you don't want to play it just yet because you don't want to
yeah,
banish one and end up with one left in your deck, one in your graveyard.
yeah, yeah. So again, a good. It is just damage, and we've said sometimes just damage isn't worth it, but I think in the context of being the end of a chain where you've done
Yeah,
15 damage already,
yeah.
and you're looking at 18 or 19 damage, then it's not a bad trade-off.
No,
Um,
definitely not.
so those are the majority of the ninja cards, or ninja attack action cards.
The
Have
only other ones that I have in
Yeah.
there are the spinning wheel kicks.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
The three I have 3 red in my main deck,
Yeah.
and then I have that one single cyclone roundhouse in my sideboard.
Yeah.
Um, spinning wheel kick again. If I've got a bonds turn where I don't want to go get the dishonor just yet,
Yeah.
I often find myself with an extra resource
Yeah.
spare from the Kodachis and a 1 for 4 where I wasn't going to use the resource anyway.
It's not bad.
Is pretty great.
Yeah. I agree. I just like the fact it comes in for 4. You offer blue
Yeah,
pitch, you can go 1/1/4 and make them think about blocking your Mars trigger. And it does have the upside of Cyclone Roundhouse.
yeah,
If you've got 2 blues, a spinning wheel kick and a Cyclone Roundhouse, or a 0 cost that you can go and find Cyclone Roundhouse for, it's really hard for the opponent to block, because
hmm
if you read the text of Cyclone Roundhouse, it says, if spinning wheel kick was the last attack this combat chain, this has, at the beginning of the reaction step, banish a random defending card from each chain link, which includes its own chain link. So if they've defended
yes,
with a card, only one card, they've defended with nothing because it gets banished. So
yeah,
we're also looking at potential armor banishes. So against assassin, it can be very useful,
yeah,
where you can get rid of their mask or their black text. And against Oldham, obviously we talked about already, getting rid of their shield is just
Game
phenomenal.
changer.
Game changer. Yeah. The pièce de résistance. So again, it was one of those cards when I read it when it came out and it's previewed, and I just thought, are you kidding? Like, this is going to be incredible.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't get it off as much as I thought I would, but then it's only really useful in certain matchups anyway.
Yeah. I think even on and off turn, if you have one in hand, going to get another one with Katsu to come in for 5.
Yeah.
Like if that's my bad turn, then
Yeah.
I'll take that any
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, absolutely. Not a bad shout. So, were there any other ninja cards I wanted to talk about? Oh, there are 2 that come to mind. Double Strike.
Yeah.
I don't personally run it, but I can see the utility, especially with things like Art of War and Ancestral Empowerment, because it is a ninja card. You can potentially get 3 or 4 damage out of those off of one card. Again,
Yeah.
it prolongs the chain, doesn't it?
Yeah. So it's there to aid Mask of Momentum.
Yeah.
I think we'll get onto this a little bit later about if there's anything I would change in
Okay.
this. And as a sneak preview, I think it might be Double Strike.
Coming in or going out?
Going out.
Okay.
Because it's fine. It's a ninja card. It
Yeah.
works on Ancestral. It adds a chain link,
Yeah.
but it's not doing anything that amazing.
Yeah.
So I can see why it's probably not in your list.
Yeah. I think it's a nice interaction to have, and when you get it in the right situation, you think, why would I ever play without this card? And then you get it when you want a 3 block, or when you want more than 1 damage, and you think, oh, I wish I had 100 wins or something different. And so the other card that I don't think you run, and I started running it as a meme because I opened the cold foil version, and now actually I really love running it, is the Shuriken.
Okay.
So I run a 1 of Silver Wind Shuriken, which is basically, if you can play it at the end of one of your chains on your turn, is an extra Breaking Scales activation. It's ideal. I feel like I'm doing a sales pitch now. It's ideal when you draw it turn 1, because you can often just play it out and have it there for the whole. So 2 Breaking Scales for the whole game is pretty good.
Yeah.
And if you don't draw it turn 1, it's another 0 cost blue. It doesn't block, but
And is it an item?
it is an an item. Yeah. So you play it out. It doesn't have go again. You have to play it at the end of the chain, but it stays on the board.
Okay. Do you take it out against Dramai in case they steal it?
No, I just leave it.
Okay.
Well, they can steal it, but they don't have any attack action cards with combo, so they can't use it.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, it isn't something I've considered. I don't know much about the card, but I mean, an extra Breaking Scales can't be bad, right?
It's just it winds people up. I think when you get it out early, they're just like, what? So that's one of the blues I run. Okay. I personally, the defensive ninja card that I run is Flick Flack. I don't know if you run any of those.
No, so this is a heated debate between myself and my friend Matt, who is also a ninja.
Yeah.
Because I don't think there's a place for Flick Flack in my Katsu deck. And I know all the arguments and I know where it works. But for me, personally, I hear the argument for Flick Flack against Lexi.
Yeah.
So being able to block 4/5.
Yeah.
I found that blocking with 2 cards against Lexi gives them the tempo. And I don't want to do that.
That's fair.
So I do see the real advantage in it, and in certain situations I see my sink below and I think, oh, I wish this was a Flick Flack. But for me, I run 3 sink belows just because it can totally fix your hand.
It can.
It can absolutely and I don't want to be blocking more than 1 card.
That's fair. I again, we could have these discussions about defense reactions in Katsu for eternity and still not agree with each other. I completely get it. Personally, I run 6 defense reactions into some matchups,
Okay.
3 into a couple, and 0 into most. Like, I do run both Flip Flak red and Sink Below red. Um,
Hmm.
as you've said, into Lexi, Flick Flak is very useful. But if you're blocking with 2 cards from hand in that turn, you sort of have to have an E strike or something to keep the
Yeah.
pressure up. That being said, if you have it in Arsenal and you're
Yeah.
blocking with that and then 1 card from hand, you neutralize the majority of their turn for very little giving up on your side. So I definitely have found use for it, and I didn't run it initially against
Okay.
Lexi. I just went full aggro, but it adds a level of consistency is probably the wrong word, but safety, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Um,
think,
it
yeah,
is,
it's such a good card. Like, I've played with it so many
yeah,
times, and I think Flick Flack is the best defense reaction that Ninja has access to.
yeah, but
I've
it just doesn't fit in
just
your deck.
found that in this current
Yeah.
meta and in my deck, it
Uh,
just makes it a bit too clunky.
and that's a completely reasonable thing to say. And one of the good um, things about doing one of these deep dives into a hero is that we can have these conversations about cards
Yeah.
that they look incredible, but if it doesn't fit in your deck, and that is a specific
Yeah.
word, fit, then it's not going to be the right thing for your deck.
Yeah.
I think both decks run, mine and yours, both run enough combo cards to make Flick Flack work. But if
Yeah.
your whole ethos is only blocking with 1 card from hand a turn, then it's probably not going to be in the right place. And as you say, the Sink Below um, is so good. It just, if you need a blue and you've got a red,
Yep.
there's a chance that you can change your whole hand. And I don't see. You mentioned Crown of Providence earlier. It does
Hmm.
basically the same thing, and you just wonder
Yeah.
how decks run without that level of cycling. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
I think everyone knows Sink Below, but I'm getting it up on the screen now. The artwork is also gorgeous. I'm a bit sad
Yeah.
that I missed out on the world's map because I didn't do the calling. I only did the worlds, and I
Okay.
didn't get the Sink Below mat with that. Not that I need any more play mats. I mean, my wife would kill me.
I was going to say you have a lot of playmats,
Um,
right?
I've got a few. Um, so yeah, Sink Below is the other red defense reaction that blocks 4. I'm going to put them in the deck and leave the Flick Flacks out, just like you said. But um, the other thing about Flick Flacks that I think we've said about many of the ninja cards already is it has a lot of text on it, but what it does to the opponent is more than the
Yeah.
text says. So I have come up against opponents who I've blocked with the Flick Flack. I've fully blocked out their first attack. This is mainly for Lexi's. Um, and then they don't attack with their second arrow because they think, oh, they're just going to block it out with 1 card. Now
Oh, okay.
I'm thinking I don't want to block with another card, like you say.
No.
Um, and they're thinking, well, there's no point in me attacking. I'll just have an extra arsenal for next turn, which then gives me the power to come back at them with a bigger turn than I would have done. So it affects the way people play because they think, oh, well, they're just going to block 5 with 1 card. I'll take it, but
Mind games.
it is mind games. A lot of Katsu is mind games. And when I came back to Katsu, I'm not sure if you've had similar issues with your testing groups, but when I came back to Katsu, people just kept saying, "Oh, well, he's not as good as Fi. He's not as consistent. Um,
Yeah.
he can brick hands completely, and then you can't do anything." But when you actually, that's all theoretical. When you
Yeah.
actually play him against real people, they make mistakes because you are asking
Yeah.
questions every single attack.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you can get the worst hands if you
Mm.
get your 3 Winds of Eternity and a blue Flusterfist. What am I doing with this? But essentially, that's where the game plan again comes in. Like,
Yeah,
I should be blocking with this to get these in my graveyard for my big
yeah.
bonds turn. That's got to be coming up, right?
I haven't seen any
Um,
bonds, and surging has been elusive now. They must be coming. I've got half my deck
yeah,
left. Where are they?
yeah,
Um, yeah, so I think it's a really interesting psychological point around playing slightly off meta heroes and
hmm
actually playing them into current meta heroes who maybe haven't practiced against them as much. Like you were
Yeah,
saying with your
definitely.
off meta opponents in Baltimore, they give you a psychological edge, or your opponent gives you a slight pitfall because you're not used to
Yeah,
playing against these heroes. Um,
exactly.
so with the cards that we've talked about so far, Lila, we have 52 cards in our main deck. I haven't put any sideboard cards apart from our equipment. I think we're done with all of the ninja cards.
Yeah,
What
I think so.
what generics are you running?
So main deck, I've got my three strikes in there.
Yep,
I think they're your perfect two card hand for so
yeah.
many decks, including Katsu. And they're also zero cost, which means you can discard them.
They're just they're such a utility card. Um, you touched on it earlier, but it does often feel like a waste when you're discarding the E strike.
Yeah,
But if you do the maths and work out how much extra damage you're doing, because it that might be the only card left in your hand, and you cannot play it on its own.
no,
So discarding it for a bonds, for example, where you're going to do 8 damage off of one card rather than 7 damage even off two cards,
yeah,
you have to go through that process, even if you are putting your £200 card in the graveyard.
yeah,
I haven't got any rainbow foils, but they are ridiculous price now.
yeah.
Um,
I unfortunately have three, so I guard my deck with
yes,
my life.
absolutely. We'll come back to expensive cards in a minute, but the E strike just gives you the flexibility. It's good for blocking. It's good for discarding. You can play it and draw a card at the end of your turn for an arsenal. You can play it and do 7 damage to threaten the mask at the end of your turn, and
Yeah,
you can have go again to prolong a turn, especially on your mask trigger. Blocking 5 on the mask trigger and then coming in with another big attack afterwards is just amazing.
yeah, yeah. I think it's great, and it's come in and out of the Katsu
Yeah,
list, but I think it's working pretty well into this meta, so
good.
it's solidly staying there.
Good. And the other one we talked about earlier was Snatch, another red
Yeah,
zero cost card. Um,
yeah. I think Snatch has to be played into Katsu, right? There's argument that it shouldn't, but
yeah,
for me personally, you're drawing more cards. Um,
again,
it is why I've got my Razor Reflexes in
yeah,
there to work on the Snatch. It's just 0 for 7, draw a card, maybe draw two cards if it's a mass trigger. There's not
yeah. Especially if the
much
razor's
better
played
in
off the tunic. I mean,
that.
um,
Yeah,
uh, Snatch is the main reason I want to fit razor into my deck, and I may go
yeah,
away and fit one sneaky razor just for fun. Um, but as you say, 1 for 7, draw a card, go again, or 0 for 4, they overblock, and then you're also feeling happy.
yep,
It's good on the end of the chain, and you're threatening a draw for your arsenal, so they feel like they have to block it out. Um,
yeah,
it again, like you said, theoretically, it's not necessarily the best card to play. It's not a ninja card. It's not got combo. It doesn't block for 3, but it
yeah,
just works. It works,
yeah,
and it's so good.
yeah. And I do think that the feeling when they block a Snatch for 7 at the end of the chain,
Yeah,
and you draw uh, a blue whelming gust wave and go, probably wouldn't have been that bad for you
yeah,
if you didn't block it.
yeah,
I'd get that in your hand for next turn.
yeah,
I'd rather it be in my hand than my arsenal, if I'm
yeah,
honest.
yeah. Absolutely, and but that's the mind game. No one knows what that next
Yeah,
card's going to be.
no.
Um, cool. And then the other generic that I do have in my main board, but I know you sideboard it, is Command and Conquer.
Yes, it is in sideboard, but it does come in against most things.
Yeah.
Um, just trying to remember what it doesn't come in against. It doesn't come in against Ninja.
No, and I guess it
Um,
doesn't really need to. Um,
no.
I mean, it's such an iconic card, and like you were saying about your E strikes, I've got a rainbow foil and a first edition CNC,
Hmm.
and so I guard my deck. Try not to leave it all over the game shop like I did a couple
No.
of couple of months ago. But yeah, there is such a good card. It does cost two, so it's more expensive than the majority of our cards. You can't discard it. But against
No.
Lexi,
Yeah.
against um, people like Dorinthia,
Yeah.
against Azalea, obviously, they are.
I think even Oldham, like I played a game with Liam
Yeah,
on Saturday in the Swiss, and I'm pretty sure he had blocked something earlier in the
yeah,
turn, and then was left with two sink belows in hand
yeah, yeah.
and
They
had to
do
take
run.
the
They do run a lot of defense reactions. I do run it against Oldham, but my only worry is that they can crown of seas
yeah,
away their arsenal. So you're losing that part of the effect. But if they can't block it, it's still six damage.
yeah,
Um, I like the card. I run two of them in the main board. I think it's just one of those cards that, again, off a two card hand, six damage. It's not a bad hand with a
no,
threatening on hit.
definitely not. Yeah,
And then if you add in this next card and are able to pitch it, and are able to play it with the CNC, CNC for seven damage is amazing. So I
yeah,
run three Art of Wars in my main deck.
yeah, me too. I think there was a time, maybe a month before Proto Baltimore, where Art of War wasn't in this Katsu list.
Yeah,
And looking back, it's like, how was it not in this list? Um, but yeah, I think it's on your big turns.
yeah.
Like, is anyone having bigger turns than a double Art of War Katsu? Um,
Double Art of War
maybe not.
Katsu. So I don't search out double Art of War turns, but
No.
the number of times that I draw an Art of War off of my first banish and discard and then think, oh, what the hell, I'll just do another one anyway,
Yeah.
is quite consistent. But
Yeah.
a surging strike for seven is
Yeah.
just ridiculous. Um,
Yeah. I think if I'm going to play Art of War, I'm looking to break cross strap on
yeah,
that turn.
yeah,
Like, I don't want to be paying for more
no,
things. Get it as big as I can.
yeah, and I completely agree. And again, it has that versatility. So I try and use it offensively whenever I can. However, being able to use it to defend with a card from Arsenal against
Yeah.
Azalea, for example, is pretty tricky. Being able to give a snatch go again is quite
Yeah.
nice. So that the primary mode I would use is +1/+1 to your attack action cards, and then banish an attack action, draw two.
Yeah.
But I would say I have used all four modes at differing times.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. I think in Katsu, all four mods are going to come up at some point or
Yeah,
another. And it's great to have them when you need them.
yeah. I love it. We have a 60 card main deck, and that's not even including some of the extra yellow bonds, blue bonds. We've got a little bit of a sideboard going on, which we've been through. So I think what do we have? 76 cards. There were four spaces left. We talked about Razor Reflex, didn't we?
Yeah.
Do you run two, three,
Two,
two?
just two.
And then with the blue bonds and the yellow bonds, that would take us up to an 80 card deck. Why can't I find Razor? The artwork is quite recognizable.
I think the only two cards we haven't spoken about
Yeah.
is I have two energy potions in my sideboard.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Yeah, and they're coming in against Kano. Um, I think just getting them out early and leaving them there until Kano decides to Kano um, is just invaluable. I think the matchup's pretty favoured into Katsu anyway, unless you have a Kano player that's been playing
Yeah.
for God knows how many years and they've played this matchup a lot. Um, and they're also coming in against Oldham
Okay.
because they're essentially setting up other cross reps.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So similar
Yeah.
to your breaking scales
Yeah.
with the item,
Yeah.
setting up more
Yeah. Yeah.
equipment. And the other one they're coming in against is Icelander.
Okay. Just for the extra ability to pay for Arcane Barrier if you need to. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Having those extra blues, it's just yeah. So instead of the energy potions, I run floating dojos instead.
Yeah,
Um, because it's an instant, because I can get card recursion, and because it's a blue.
yeah. I do really enjoy that card. It was in the list at one point.
I only
Um,
run it against Icelander and Oldham, but um,
yeah.
it annoys them when you play it and you're like, oh, I'm just gonna.
Yeah.
If you manage to get it off before or as you're triggering an Art of War banished, that's quite good as well because then you can curate your
Yeah.
draw, but that very rarely happens. Um, Amazing. So we have a full deck. We've been through. It's not your exact deck,
Yeah.
although once once some of these competitive events are over, then we will release Lila's deck into the wild with the video. Have a look in the description below, and you'll be able to find that. And just yeah, I think the main thing I want to say to people with Katsu is go and give it a try. Um,
Yeah.
it's for me, perhaps um, it's the go-to deck for when I say to people, stick with one deck and get reps on it, and you'll get much better with that deck. Like Katsu, that is truer for Katsu than it is for almost any other deck, I think.
Yeah.
Knowing the combo lines for one, knowing how to structure your turn, knowing when to block and when not to block. For me, that's the key sort of game knowledge. But what you were saying about your matchups and having a plan into each matchup and sticking to that plan,
Yeah.
that's key.
Yeah, I think so. I think you start seeing a turn that could go one way or another, but it's a coin flip.
Yeah.
It never goes in your favour. Stick to what you know, unless you really have to. Um, I guess the worst one is when you are out of war with nothing to go
Yes.
first. You're like hoping and crossing your fingers.
And again, I've had people tell me that Art of War should not be in this deck um, because
Yeah,
of that. Because of it makes you sometimes you have to be really disciplined with when you play it, and sometimes it's best to leave it in your hand or leave it in your arsenal to wait for the right turn to play it. But again, this comes with reps. This comes with experience.
yeah,
Um, you said it yourself. Like if you're hitting and hoping, if you're crossing your fingers and hoping, that's probably the wrong decision for this Katsu deck.
yeah,
And even if you have to play it safe for a turn and just offer 6 damage or 7 damage, and then come back again next turn, it is a full aggro deck, but there's an element of setup to it as well.
yeah.
Um, just before we finish off, Lila, and I want to say thank you for your time because it's been such a pleasure chatting through with a fellow Katsu enthusiast. What you mentioned some changes that you might think about making. Are there any cards that you've had in testing that you might swap out, or anything you want to test coming up?
So I think the double strike
Yeah.
it doesn't need to be there,
Mm-hmm.
but what else could be there? And I think one idea I'm trying out at the minute is should that be a red soul bead strike? Yeah, is it soul bead strike?
If it hits, go again.
Yes.
0 for 4. If it hits, go again. Yeah.
Yeah, should it be? Do you want to make people block? Probably.
Yeah.
Am I going to play it at the start of my turn? Probably not.
Okay.
It's going to be a turn ender.
Yeah.
Um, it's going to get me 2 more damage every time I play it compared with the double strike.
Yeah.
Um, so that's the main change. It just scares me that it doesn't have innate go again.
Yeah.
But I do respect that card and think it does have a place
When
in
you're
my list in particular.
when you're playing the Katsu Mirror and it comes out, you do think, oh, I need to be
Yeah.
careful. Like it's an immediate, oh, I need to slow down and just play this correctly.
Yeah, and I think if it's the first chain link for a Katsu, um, that's probably more threatening than the
Mm.
mass trigger.
It for me, if it's played out as the first chain link, they either
It's the
have
razor.
a razor or they're going
Yeah,
to use their snaps.
yeah,
Um, it's tricky
it's a
to play
tricky one.
around. Yeah. So I'm going to switch us back to the main view. We are back. Um, that, as I said, that was a real pleasure just going through the basics of a Katsu deck. Now, as we said at the beginning, it's not a Katsu deck for everyone. It's
No.
not the only way to build a Katsu deck. I played a whole season through Dynasty of Crouching Tiger Katsu because it was really fun. But it is just damage, like you said. It's not. It's
Yeah.
not as if you're doing anything crazy different. What I think separates your Katsu deck from some of the mishmash decks we see testing on Talishar, for example, is that it has a
Mm.
plan, and you have a plan for every matchup that you come up against. That shows, and the cards we've just talked about are in there for a specific reason. They have a justification. It's not just, oh well, it does more damage.
Yeah.
Um, how how do you feel with this deck for the rest of the RTN season, and do you see yourself moving forward through national season with a similar deck?
I think moving through RTN season, that I'd be pretty confident on this
Mm-hmm.
deck still. After that, I think people will sort of figure it out.
Okay.
I think that happens a lot with ninja decks,
Yeah.
where as soon as it's been played at a couple of events, people are expecting it, like they're expecting the two razors.
Yeah.
Um, moving forwards, who knows? Like the meta is going to change completely
Good
when
answer.
Dusk Till Dawn comes
Yeah.
out.
Well, we've
Is
got
there
new
a
rune
place for
blades. We've
Katsu?
got new illusionists. Yeah.
Right?
I remember Katsu was very good into the original Prism.
Yeah,
Similar to the Dromai matchup, it was you were able to clear the board state fairly consistently, but then the new Rune Blade looks almost control in their design. Like I don't know whether that's
yeah,
going to be a thing. Um, and Katsu doesn't like control decks. You have to have a
no,
specific game plan to do that.
yeah, exactly. So I would like to play this at Nationals.
Yeah,
Will I be playing this? I'm not sure. Um, I'd probably put money on I will be playing some form of Katsu list because I'm a ninja player through and through.
through and through.
Um, but yeah, I'm excited to see how the deck will need to adapt to the new meta that's going to be coming out.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much again for your time. Um, do you have any shout outs you want to give before we finish up?
I guess I'll shout out to Rob Catton, my fiance, and Matt Duggan for building the fundamentals of this
Okay.
deck. Like a lot of people know me, I'm not a deck builder. I can't picture what the final deck looks like, but
Yeah.
I will get hundreds of reps in on Talishar
Yeah.
and tell you what needs changing.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's interesting to see that distinction. I wouldn't say I'm a particularly innovative deck builder either, but I will make it work for me when I know where the structure is.
yeah, and then probably just James Thorgan as well because he's part of our testing group,
Oh,
and
just James. Give him a
just
shout out.
James. Because yeah, without someone like James hosting our testing nights, we wouldn't be where we are now, I guess.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I wish you the best of luck for the RTN season. I hope
Thank
Rob
you.
does well in Antwerp this weekend, and
You
any of
too.
the rest of you. I don't know if Matt and James are going. I'm assume they are going to Antwerp.
James is going, Matt is not.
Okay.
But hopefully they do well, and then we'll jet off on holiday shortly afterwards.
And enjoy your holiday. Thanks for taking the time to speak to me. Viewers, listeners, go and sign up. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content like this, and we have a Patreon if you're interested. But Leila, once again, thank you so much. Have a lovely
Thank you.
holiday, and we will speak to you
Thank
soon.